Hello everyone. So today we are going to learn about the server-side processing. So in the previous video of the data tables, we understood how to implement the basic data tables. But in today's session, we are going to understand that, and that data table was processing the data at the client side. And this lecture is all about implementing the data table server side. So So this was the code from the previous data table. If you do not have any idea what was the previous lecture was all about, please click on the I button and you'll be able to see the link, or I'll be pasting the link in the description box. So let's quickly start the server-side processing data table. So as you can see, I have like all the data present in the T body, but in the server side. So this example was for the client side processing, but we need to process the data at the server side. We need to get the data from the server every time you perform any kind of action. So let's quickly remove this data present in the HTML so that we'll be able to see the changes. uh, let's remove this tr as well. So we have empty T body, correct? And I have this test.cshtml. So I had created one T head already, which was implemented. So I'll be using full name, email, phone, and action, which I'm getting from the server. So I'll be replacing this with that. And let me also change the footer. uh, Remember one thing: it does not matter whether you have footer in your like table diagram or not, but the header, I mean the T head columns are important while rendering the data table. Okay, so I have changed the full name, email, phone, and action as a column. So let's reload this table. So now we have no data available in the table, correct? Now what we are going to do, so this was the basic data table from the previous session, right? So we are going to comment it out for the timing. So let's comment it out, and let's just remove this one. So now we have nothing implemented. We have no data table, so you'll not be able to see anything. Okay, but let's go ahead and copy some existing code which is present. So I'll be explaining line by line what I have done exactly. So the very first thing which you need to define is the like the column definitions from the data table. So these are the column definitions. So column definitions defines that you need to have this format, an array. Inside that array you should have multiple objects, and that in that object you are going to define some properties like target. So target defines that what should be the target of the column. So if target is 0, it means you are talking about this first name. Okay, and in the same way target 1, 2, and 3 are talking about email, phone, and action. And then you have one render property, and it you need to define a function for that, and this function takes 4 arguments like data, type, row, and meta. So if we are going to like console.log the row, then will be able to see all the data which is coming from the backend. So how do you want to transform a specific column that is defined by the render property? Okay, so what I did here was that I implemented the full name, and I merged the first name and the last name, and then I created a link for that, and like added the full name property or the variable into that and returned it. Okay, for those targets for which you do not want to generate the dynamic HTML, you can just define the target, the data. So this data defines that what should be the property of the incoming data from the server which you need to bind to this column. So I'm getting the email uh, in the as a property of email from the backend. So I'm just binding this data to the email, and whether this column should be sortable or not. So I made one as true, I mean this email is true and phone as false. So I just wanted to have the simple uh, you know elements for email and phone, and the last one is action. So you'll be able to understand each and everything after I load the data table, that what exactly I've done it. So this is the action. Let me not explain you this right now. So let me copy another variable, which is data table options. So you can directly have the data table options into this, but I'm you know creating separate variable for that and storing data table options. So let me copy this and let's put the data table options as well. Okay, so now if you observe from the previous session that something has changed in this data table options. So these are the normal options which was present. The column definitions is a property which you need to define, and for that we have passed a variable which is data table column definitions, which we have already defined, right? So and one more thing has changed, that there is one Ajax property which you need to define if you want to do the server-side processing. So I have defined the Ajax property for that, and this is my server URL. So this is my server URL. Okay, so this is the endpoint which I am going to use. So let me show you the endpoint as well. So customer controller, and there is one action method or the endpoint called list. So I'll simply copy this URL. So you need to adjust the URL based upon your requirement. So I have this customer as controller and list as action method. So I'll be putting this, and the method type would be post, and this is all you need to load the data from the server. Okay, and one more option is there which is called created row. Okay, so created row helps you to perform some action while the row is getting created. So let's say on each row, let's say you want to make one of the row as like mark the background as red, or mark the text of that row, specific row, as red. Then based upon certain conditions you can change the color of that row as well. Okay, so okay, now I have data table options as well and data table column definitions as well. Let me go ahead and now initialize the data table. So after I have added both of this, I'll be initializing the data table with this data table options. Obviously in the data table you pass the data table options, so I have passed that. Okay, and I guess the ID is same for that. Yes, example 2 is the ID. So as you can see, we have nothing here. Let's put a breakpoint at the backend and let's test it out. So let's go here, let's reload this and see it is loading the it has hit the the backend server. So as soon as we continue, we are going to get the data, correct? So see, I told you, right, for the target 0, which was full name, I have merged first name and last name and created it as a link, so it came as a link. But in the action we are not able to see anything. This is because, let's go to the data table.html again, and then let's go to the data table column definition. So we are creating this target 3, which is 0, 1, 2 and 3. So target 3 is action. So we are creating two links, link for edit and link for delete. So we are having this font awesome element, which we have not included in our example. So I'll simply add edit text and delete. Okay, so let's reload it. Let's remove the breakpoint from the backend. So see, now you are able to see edit and delete for each of the row. Okay, so let me show you how it loads the data. So if I click on the second pagination link, then it is again going to send me my server request. Now the question should be that how it is doing that. Where, like, if you have any idea about, how the pagination and all works from the like backend side, then you must be having the idea that for pagination to work, you need to send the current index to the server. And obviously, if you are searching something as well, let's say I'm searching anything, so it should be, this text should be going to the server, and based upon the input which you have put, it should be searched on the records present in the database. Or maybe if you are changing the length of your data table, then also something needs to be sent to the server, correct? So how it is happening, so let me quickly show you that. So at the client side, it was not the worry that you need to send some request back to the server and get the database. All the data was present at the client side, at the browser only. But in the server side, you need to send the request every time you make any change or any action to the data table. So let me quickly inspect the element and try to go to the network. So I hope you understand that why the network tab is used in the inspect element or the developer console, because we can intersect the each request which is going to the server or coming, the response which we are getting from the server back. Okay, so let me do the length change. So let's say that we do not want to load the 10 records, we want to load 25 records at a time. So let's make a request. So see, it made a request. So it is the headache of the data table to make a request to the server. So now let's observe that what the the request to the server contains, and what all parameters. So if you see, it was a post method, as we have mentioned it, right? The status code is 200. But if you are able to see that in the form data, you'll be able to see multiple parameters which was sent by the data table. So draw is 8. I mean, how many time you have done specific action to this data table, so that is defined by the draw. Columns 0 data, column 0 name. It is basically defining the parameters for each and every column. So for column 0, is it searchable, is it orderable? So if you remember that, for phone we have made sorting as false, so 0, 1 and 2. So see, I mean, orderable is false for phone, correct? And column third, so column third has some data. So since we have just changed the length of the the data table, it is sending the length property as 25. Okay, the start is 0. So the start defines that what is the starting of the record. So it identifies the start as 0, as we denote in the array, correct? So start element is, so let's say there are 25 elements, so starting element would be 0 and the end element would be 24, correct? The length is 25. The search value is nothing. Excuse me. So the search value is sent as blank, and the search regex is sent as blank. Okay, and the order type should be ascending. So this is how your data table interacts with the your server. So at the server side, you need to trace all the parameters which was sent by the data table and process that data based upon that request. So I hope you have understood everything regarding the request which data table sends. So let me close this, and let me clear the console and try to show you one more example. So other than this 25, let's search something. Let's say Shibam. So currently it is sending like 4 requests to the server, but we only because for each and every text it is sending the request, that also we can configure or change. So let's see in the form data what exactly was sent to the server. So for the very first character, it was sent as S, for this SHUB, and for the last one it was Shubham. So based upon the Shubham I intercepted it at the backend, and then I search the record from the database based upon the search value, and the length is still 25. So let me clear this. Now let's keep the search as Shubham only, and let's change the length. So again, one request went to the server. Now the search value is Shubham, but the length got changed. So by this way, you need to intercept your request at the backend. Okay, let's clear this out. So your you know the records in the data table will start loading up. So this is how the server side processing of this table works, data table works. So these are the parameters. Let me quickly show you. So I hope you understand the data table column definitions, how it is working, and the data table options. So this is pretty much clear. The paging, these are the options, like whether we want paging or not, whether we want like ordering or not, the data table should be responsive or not, or Ajax. Ajax I've already explained you. And what about the created row? So let's do one thing. Let's console.log and see how, in what format the data is coming. So let me do console.log, and let's console.log the data. Okay, so let's inspect the element. Let's go to the console and just reload the table. So see, in this format the data is coming from the backend. So I have this customer ID, email, first name, last name, phone, and zip code. So and I'm also sending the DT row ID. So on row created, if you, so I'm like, I want to change the color of this DT, the fifth ID. I mean the customer with the fifth ID. So what I'm going to do is I'm just checking that if the DT row data. So what is the DT row data? This is the DT row data. In that data, the P key is present. So dot P key, if that is equals to 5, then what I'm going to do is the current row dot CSS should be red. So the current row which we are getting, I'm just setting the CSS property to red. So let me go ahead and reload it. So see, the first element had the P key as 5, so it changed its color to red. So even if you go to the second page of the data table, it will not show you anything, but if you come to the first page, it will change the color of the current row of your data table. So this is how you can perform some actions on specific row which you want to have. So I guess this is all if we talk about the server side processing. So by this way, so there are so many options present in the data table as well. That you can obviously explore. If you search data table JQuery, go to the data tables, and everything is mentioned in the documentation. So just go to the full getting started guide, and see, I was telling you the server side processing. So if you click on server side processing, you are going to see all the sent parameters. So I have already shown you the sent parameter. The sent parameters are nothing but the parameters which the data table sends to the server while making a request. So you can have a detailed overview of what each and every property which is being sent to the server contains, and this is the return data. So this is the format of the return data which your data table should have. So I have made the same same kind of format for my response. Okay, and this was the additional properties which you can add to your response. Okay, and so I guess this is pretty much it about the data table. I hope you must have understand so many things about how to do it. I mean, how to process your data using the server-side processing of the data table. So let me show you. Okay, obviously you can put your the JSON or the endpoint URL here. So that is it. If we talk about the server-side processing of the data table, obviously there are so many things to do with the data tables based upon your requirement, but by using the the current options which I have shown you, you will be at least able to create some basic data table. uh, if if you want this source code uh, you know of this example which I have shown you, so you'll be able to see it in my GitHub link. So I'll be pasting my GitHub link in the description box. If you like this video, just give it a thumbs up, and subscribe if you want to stay tuned with the upcoming videos which I'm going to have. And cheers, happy coding, thank you.